is a matter. I can't believe that you're mine. You and you were wala. Mena umale mekezela makoloa. Umajeza pino dia balea. Uzani samalira diana. Tima wako ni wobo.
The views and perceptions are divided. Those who are
and welcome to Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective, broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. You can actually catch us live on SABC Plus app, DSTV, OWBK, Channel 802, and on OpenView, Channel 628. Once again, thanks for listening and thanks for tuning in. I'm Tabiso Lohoko. Let's go straight into stories that made headlines today. The former Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila is being tried on charges including treason over his alleged support for Rwanda-backed militants. The trial of Kabila, who returned to live in Goma in May this year, began in the Gombe district of the capital, Kinshasa. The former president faces charges of plotting to overthrow the government of President Felix Tshisekedi, which could result in a death sentence, as well as homicide, torture, and rape linked to the anti-government force M23. Democracy activist Kabasu Babu Katulondi says perceptions of the public are divided.
The views and perceptions are divided. Those who are core Tshisekedi loyalists, of course, and militant of his party, they support him because according to them, the war must go on and Tshisekedi must militarily vanquish M23, AFC M23, and also also crush all his political opponents to maintain his grip on power. On the other hand, people who side with the opposition and other organizations of civil society claim that or point out that accusation, the prosecution, does make sense. First of all, in terms of the legal proceedings, and it is an aspect that has been pointed out by former President Kabila's lawyers.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has acted unconstitutionally in appointing a Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations made by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Lawyer for former President Jacob Zuma, Advocate Dali Mpofu, has argued in the Constitutional Court that it is illegal for any member of the judiciary, a sector fingered in the allegations, to head such a commission. Mkhwanazi claimed that a drug cartel in Gauteng was controlling a high-level criminal syndicate that extended into the South African Police Service, the Police Ministry, Parliament, official prison structures, the judiciary, and other law-enforcing authorities. Mpofu says that there are structures that are constitutionally mandated to look at the conduct of judges.
You can't be the judge and the referee and the player, as people would say in the street. It's a simple concept of law. So that's the first thing. But we then go further and we say that in any event, even if this was not even if this was a non-judicial commission, it would be problematic for a second reason. You would be imbuing that commission with the power to investigate the conduct of judges. That function is constitutionally and exclusively preserved for the JSC or the Magistrates Commission.
There is an alarming increase in cases of children, women and men who are being smuggled into South Africa and beyond the borders. According to the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, in the last In the last year, 74 people were rescued, mostly women, children and young people under the age of 25. Speaking at the World Day Against Human Trafficking observed yesterday, former South African Interpol Ambassador Andy Mashila said that some progress has been made by law enforcement and non-governmental organizations to combat human trafficking. Mashila highlighted the dangers and human rights violations of human trafficking.
Human beings must never be taken to be goods that will be taken from one point to the other without their consent, number one. Number two, the stats that we pick up with regard to this human trafficking disease and satanic deeds by those who are involved in what you and I refer to as modern day slavery.
Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says 7 more people have died of conditions linked to malnutrition over the last 24 hours. The announcement brings the reported number of hunger-related deaths since the start of the Israel-Gaza war to 151. More than half were children. Director of UN Women in Geneva, Sophia Koltrop.
17,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women are facing acute malnutrition. And of course, services have collapsed. Those women and children are faced with absolutely nothing. They are delivering their babies without water, without any medical support.
Officials in Guatemala say an armed attack at a funeral in the capital has killed at least 7 people and wounded 13 others. They say the attack was linked to gang rivalry in Guatemala, which has one of the highest murder rates in the world. The BBC's Warren Bull has the details.
Guatemala's Interior Minister Francisco Jimenez said that on Monday, a member of the Barrio 18 gang was killed in a shootout. A day later, he said, members of the rival MS-13 gang stormed a funeral home in another part of Guatemala City during the service for the assassinated man. According to the minister, the gunmen opened fire on the family of the deceased and other mourners before fleeing on motorcycles. Mr. Jimenez said it was unacceptable that police officers assigned to monitor the service had abandoned their posts minutes before the attack.
The South African National Defence Force, SANDF, is investigating the death of its member who is suspected to have been trampled by elephants at Madimbo in Limpopo. SANDF spokesperson Prince Shabalala says a Private Xavier Reynard was found dead near the gate of the Madimbo base on Sunday. Shabalala says Reynard was conducting routine patrols during the SANDF's Operation Corona, a national initiative to protect the country's borders. Shabalala says Reynard's service weapon was recovered at the scene.
Early indications suggest that he may have been fatally trampled by a herd of elephants whilst conducting routine patrols in the area. His service weapon was recovered at the scene. The matter is currently under investigation by the SANDF authorities in cooperation with environmental and wildlife officials in order to determine the exact circumstances surrounding the incident. The SANDF also instituted a formal board of inquiry.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
SABC Sport brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful 5-part documentary series about the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting on the 13th of July at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2, tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache and the heroics that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere. No subscriptions needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
Broadcasting in 5 different languages, connecting the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective.
The U.S. tsunami warning has cautioned about the hazardous tsunami waves as it may affect the coasts of Russia, Japan, Alaska and Hawaii. Aerial views have showed people taking shelter on top of buildings in northern Japan following a magnitude 8.8 earthquake which struck off Russia's far eastern Kamchatka Peninsula. Several people have been injured in the remote Russian region. Bonolo Maribe has more.
A powerful magnitude 8.8 earthquake of Russia's far eastern Kamchatka Peninsula has triggered tsunami waves and sparked evacuation orders from Hawaii and across the Pacific. The peninsula in Japan sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a geologically active region prone to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. In Hawaii, their governor, Josh Green, has advised coastal residents to get to high ground.
Thank you for sticking with us. Also, thank you for being calm and being safe. So far, we have not seen a wave of consequence, which is a great relief to us. It's kind of a blessing to not be reporting any damage. We have seen significant water recede several times in Haleiwa, and there were 2 waves that were measured coming through the Midway Atoll. So that's been our concern. We expressed, how tall they were. The first one, 30 centimeters. The second one, a full 3 feet with an amplitude, but also a total height of 6 feet from trough to peak.
Honolulu Emergency Management Officer Randall Collins has also called for caution.
Our number one priority is life safety. And so right now, it's an easy thing. Get away from the beaches, get inland, and get upward. That's our message right now. I would also tell you that we are working hard with all of the city agencies and other stakeholders to make sure that we are activating the tsunami assembly areas around the Oahu. And we want everyone to, if you do live in an area that's within a tsunami area, go inward and upward out of the tsunami area.
While Japanese authorities have issued a tsunami warning and called on people to evacuate in the country's east coast, workers have been ordered to leave the Fukushima nuclear plant. It was the site of a meltdown after the 11 March 2011 earthquake when over 15,000 people died. Japanese Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi says their concern is to evacuate all affected residents.
He says, for citizens in the areas included in the tsunami warning, please evacuate to a safe place immediately, such as designated evacuation buildings and hills. We are receiving reports and currently monitoring for any details of damage or casualties.
Russian Regional Governor Vladimir Solodov has asked for calm.
Сегодняшнее землетрясение стало серьезным испытанием для всех нас.
He says that today's earthquake was a challenge for all of us. It is the strongest quake in decades of tremors. According to preliminary estimates by specialists and seismologists, the magnitude of the earthquake was 7.7 to 7.9, and there is tsunami threat warning. That is why I am again repeating my plea to stay away from coastlines. Specialists have already begun a thorough inspection of sites and significant facilities for possible quake damage. This includes schools and hospitals.
Жертв нет, но сейчас уже на место выехали специалисты.
Meanwhile, Indonesia's Geophysics Agency has also issued a warning that tsunami waves of less than 0.5 meters may hit some parts of the country. I'm Bonolo Maribe, SABC News.
The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
The Shy Guy, a Morning Switch.
Have you ever listened to a song and then it gives you goosebumps? Cause it takes you way back in the 80s. My goodness. Hey baby. You hear Yvonne Chaga Chaga there. I wanna talk to the DJ. And then the DJ goes like, hey baby, I've got you on the other side. Huh? There were no WhatsApps then, right? There were no sliding in the TMs at the time. Oh man.
Your weekend mornings are activated with the Shy Guy on the Morning Switch. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
We now move to Madagascar. As droughts worsen in southern Madagascar, thousands of Antandroy people have been forced to leave their homes, walking or traveling over 1,500 kilometers in the search of food, water, and safety. A new Amnesty International report says that Malagasy government has failed to protect them and links the crisis to both colonial-era policies and global climate injustice. To unpack the findings, we're joined by Nchiko Wanchiko, Amnesty International's researcher on climate justice for East and Southern Africa. Nchiko, thanks for being with us. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for having me.
Great. To start off, what's the main message of this new report on the Antandroy people?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. For many people who know Madagascar, they would definitely know that in the southern part of the country, the severe drought that have been really hitting the land of the Antandroy people who live in the Androy region in the southern part of the country. And here we are really speaking of an agropastoralist community. So essentially surviving on agriculture and cattle herding. And they've been doing this for generations. And they've kept to their traditions. So the situation that we are really unpacking in the report that we launched earlier today is really to demonstrate how the droughts that have now been linked to climate change have made it impossible for these people to easily perform agriculture. And this has gone on to affect many aspects of their lives. So, for example, with no agriculture, they have not been able to procure food. And this has affected many aspects of their day-to-day life, affecting market, affecting their health. And it is in this context that many of them has embarked on displacement as coping strategies. So about 90,000 people have fled the drought-induced famines that have been characteristic of southern Madagascar, and many of them have been the Antandroy people, and they've been moving towards other parts of the country. So the report that we launched today was really like looking at the rights of people who are already in displacement in terms of the protection and the support that the Malagasy government is supposed to give them. The report really brings it out clearly that we know that Madagascar has very little responsibility when it comes to climate change. The climate change that is really intensifying the drought, leading to the displacement of these people, the Antandroy people. That is really, really clear. But there are steps that the Malagasy government is to do in terms of its national plans that are aimed at responding to the impact of climate change, including the drought. So when we look at government strategies like plans and solutions that it has put in place to address how climate change is affecting the lives of Malagasy people, including the Antandroy people, these strategies are very silent on the needs of these people already in displacement. So, and with no protection and support, so they've been really like left to fend for themselves. So the report really looks at the human rights violations that they've experienced as a result of this neglect. So we looked at the violations experienced on the way because many of them have been taking the Boueni region in the northern part of the country, about 1,500 kilometers away, as their main destination. So the report is really like showing the violations on the way, the violations upon arrival, and the violations that they experience when the government places them in a resettlement site that falls far below the standard of an adequate standard of living.
I note that the report states that this is climate displacement, and you've also mentioned the reasons why they would walk 1,500 kilometers just to survive. It's a very staggering finding. And, you know, we know the reasons why they're led to end up walking that journey. This climate displacement has to do with the drought. How did Amnesty arrive to the concept?
Yeah, please come again. Is the question whether climate displacement has something to do with the drought?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. So, of course, in terms of displacement, linking displacement to drought are very complex phenomena to study, and this is also a reality in Madagascar, because there are really like multiple factors that lead to displacement. So the droughts that have been really intensified by climate change are just a major contributing factor, because at the point of departure in the Android region, where these people are fleeing from, where they're fleeing the famines from, the hunger that has been really characterizing their lands, there are already like broken systems, I would say, in place, and then we just have this as a threat multiplier. So it's a major contributing factor, but not the sole reason.
Amnesty, the report also talks about colonial era policies. How does that history connect to what's happening today in Chiko?
So one of the things that we do at Amnesty International in all the research, the campaign, and the advocacy that we do is we try to look at the root cause of the issues. So while conducting this research, we try to locate the root cause of this displacement of the Antandroy people. And we really found, and this is really clear, this information has been out there, that the Androy region, where the Antandroy people are from, has been experiencing droughts, chronic droughts for generations. However, these people never used to leave their land to go towards other parts of the country. And the reason for this was because they had a drought-resilient vegetation of cactus that could allow them to have access to food and water during drought period, and to essentially coexist with the drought. And now Madagascar gets colonized by the French in around 1896. But the Antandroy people are still very much self-reliant because of this particular vegetation. So now the intention of the French colonial administration was to actually tap into the Antandroy people as a source of cheap labor to move towards the other part of the country, the other part of the island, to work in cash crops plantations. But this was very difficult for the colonial administration because these people were really self-reliant, relying on this particular vegetation, and so they didn't have any interest to leave their lands, and even to leave and to go and take very poorly remunerated jobs that the colonial administration was offering. So to go around this, what the settlers did was to manipulate parasites of cochineal and placing these into canisters that were able to spray over this vegetation, which was about 40,000 hectares of land. And this took place between 1924 to 1929. Over 5 years, the whole vegetation was destroyed. And this is where the origin of this displacement of the Antandroy people comes in. 1930, the drought, the chronic drought hit again. But at this particular point in time, the Antandroy people had already lost that natural stronghold that was allowing them to coexist with the chronic droughts that have been hitting their region. And so in the district of Tihombe, for example, in the Androy region, about half of the population either died because of the humanitarian crisis that came with the drought in the absence of this natural support, or this vegetation that was allowing the people to coexist with the drought. So half the population either died or fled the district. And this is really the origin of the displacement that we are experiencing today from the Androy region towards other parts of Madagascar. So as a coping strategy, because these are events that took place in the 1920s, the 1930s, the Antandroy people had to change somehow their cultural way of life. So every time chronic droughts were to come, that was a signal for seasonal mobility. So they could leave and go towards other parts of the country and then come back. So they really somehow integrated this as part of their culture, as part of their tradition. It's just that global climate change is coming today to now intensifying the drought, that we are no longer observing seasonal mobility, and we are seeing populations moving more permanently, embarking on more permanent displacement. And in the past, it used to be young men who were to leave to go and look for any types of jobs in other parts of the country and to come back. But nowadays, we are seeing men leaving, coming back to retrieve their families. And we're having also cases that we documented in the report of now women taking it upon themselves to leave and to go to towards other parts of the country.
So everyone
really
is now leaving in Chico.
Yeah, there are many people that are already leaving. There is an issue of data collection also in Madagascar on this particular point, and this is one of the key points that we are putting forward for the Malagasy government. The available data that we have for now is coming from the organization, from the International Organization for Migration, but even this particular international body has been really using case studies that can say, for example, take 20 municipalities in the Android region to just project how many people have been living. So we don't have specific data that can say that it's actually, this actual percentage of the population that have left. But we know that
it is actually 20 municipalities.
There are more municipalities in the Android region, and the data that the IOM has been really relying on has been to take this just as case studies to provide, a picture of what is happening, but not really to cover the whole region and to give, really exact numbers of who is really living. And there's still data lacking at the point of arrival, because we actually don't know how many people are moving towards the other 20 and plus regions of Madagascar.
With that said, I'd like to find out from you whether, with the statements that the Malagasy government said that they're doing enough with the resources at their disposal, do you think it's fair of them to say so?
Madagascar has a very small responsibility when it comes to the climate change crisis. So that is a fair statement, but then the fact that Madagascar has little responsibility for climate change does not excuse it from its human rights obligations. So what our report has been able to show is how the Malagasy government has been actually rendering an already vulnerable community even vulnerable. So, for example, it is up to the government, if it is to receive support from global north countries, European countries, the United States, countries that have more responsibility for climate change. The government needs to give us the numbers and say, X number of people are being displaced, X number of people are men, X number of people are women. These are their human rights needs. The government has not been collecting that data or even relying on data that is available to quantify where possible what are actually the actual needs of the people who have been on the move. And some of their key needs are actually access to land, because this is an agro-pastoralist community. And as I said in the beginning, that have been trying to keep to their cultural tradition, which is to do agriculture and to do cattle herding for generations. So the Malagasy government has not been doing that. And to increase the vulnerability of these people, the government has been subjecting them to forced evictions, particularly for those who have settled around the Ankarafanski National Park, which is an important park not only for Madagascar, but really for the whole world because of its rich biodiversity. And while the government has the right to evict people, yes, but for an already vulnerable community, it has international obligations to provide alternative accommodation. The government has not been doing this. And we've also painted a case of which actually shows that the government is not taking progressive steps in the realization of this particular, in terms of providing the support and the assistance, the protection that these particular people need, by placing them in a resettlement site where the conditions are very akin to the conditions that we could have in an open air prison, with people really being trapped in a resettlement camp, unable to leave, and with tragic incidents like people dying already that we are able to touch on in our report.
Njiko, really, thank you very much for painting us a clear picture of what's happening in that part of the world. We'll keep tabs on your research and see how far you've gone, because I can tell from what you have told us that there's much more that you will be able to tell us in the coming days or so. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It's been 4 years of the African continent
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. Big news from Channel Africa. Now you can listen and watch your favorite shows on Channel Africa. Channel Africa is streaming live on the internet on all our social media pages at Channel Africa 1 from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. Central African Time. Download the SABC Plus app or visit our website www.channelafrica.co.za and stream us live on all our social media pages at Channel Africa 1. Channel Africa now streaming for your eyes and ears only. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
The Integrated Faceless Classification has warned that famine is already unfolding in Gaza, where millions face severe shortages of food, water and medical supplies under a brutal siege. Oxfam says Israel's blockade has created life-threatening conditions while international action remains insufficient. Joining us now from Gaza is Chris McIntosh, Oxfam's humanitarian response advisor, to explain the situation on the ground and what urgent steps are needed. Chris, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm very happy to connect with you this evening because you're straight right there and you will be able to tell us exactly what's happening on the ground. What does the IPC alert mean in practical terms from civilians in Gaza right now? And what are you seeing and hearing on the ground?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good evening to all of your listeners and viewers. What the IPC announcement means is actually exactly what we thought would happen right when this blockade was implicated in the very beginning of March. So the blockade effectively is about to turn 5 months old, and since then, very, very small amounts of food and other needed items have entered the Gaza Strip, and it's created what we're seeing now, which is people that are emaciated from lack of any food at all. We're seeing people that are clearly weakened from malnutrition. We're seeing marketplaces that support this with hardly any food items. And what food items are available are going at exorbitant prices, cost prohibitive, mind you, for most of the population in the Gaza Strip. And so that's where we sit right now. And I can't emphasize this enough. It's exactly what Oxfam and our peer agencies have been warning for many months, what would happen due to the bureaucratic and administrative obstacles to access that Israel has put in place. We cannot get goods into the Gaza Strip. And that's the state of affairs as it sits right now.
No. So I guess, from what you have just said, it's a pure sign of if nothing can come in, even operations are affected.
Let me say that things are coming in, but it's absolutely minimal. And frankly, the Israeli authorities have done this, have orchestrated this very deliberately and very systematically over the months in order to be able to say, yes, some goods are getting into Gaza. For example, there are trucks that are getting into Gaza, not nearly to the degree that's necessary to sustain life in the Gaza Strip. Additionally, there are airdrops that are happening. And all of this is nothing but token gestures that barely begin to meet the needs. And on the airdrops specifically, if I may say, this is quite a stunt to airdrop in aid in order to portray the picture that the Gaza Strip is inaccessible, that the Gaza Strip is some particular whole very separate from the rest of the world. That couldn't be further from the truth. It's not a mountainous area. It's not a remote island in the middle of the ocean. The Gaza Strip sits on a Mediterranean coastal plain that's extremely accessible. All that needs to happen is Israel needs to open up the many gates that lead into the Gaza Strip, take advantage of the existing roads, and allow the aid to come in efficiently. Not pulling stunts like allowing airdrops that barely begin to meet the needs, airdrops that land on top of tents that people are living in, airdrops that are landing within restricted military areas that make it extremely dangerous for people to even approach at the risk of being shot dead. Airdrops that end up in the sea and people risk their lives going in that way. So these are all token, completely for show efforts in order to distract from the real issue here. And the real issue here is the systematic oppression and the systematic control that's happening in the Gaza Strip of the Gazans themselves by Israel. That's what it's really about. And anything that Israel says or does that's quote unquote humanitarian is merely merely a token.
Are these airdrops reaching the most in need?
No, and thank you for the question. No, absolutely not. None of the aid is reaching those most in need. As humanitarians, that's precisely what we do, is we identify those most in need. And in the case of Gaza right now, when we say those most in need, what we mean is the people who need food in order not to die in the very near future. And that's what we are trained to do. That is why we exist as humanitarians. This is our bread and butter. This is the work that we do. And as part of the systematized oppression, the architect of oppression that Israel has in place, they have conducted a full frontal assault on the humanitarian community, marginalized us completely, kept us from being able to do our jobs, and therefore make the Gazan population beholden to the few points where they might receive aid, be it airdrops or these distribution centers. But none of it, again, is about any humanitarian assistance. It's about controlling the population.
Your job as a humanitarian is to be there. And I would imagine that right now you're facing restrictions and challenges. Can you take us through those?
Absolutely. There's no end to the challenges, particularly when it comes to access. And that starts, as an international, that starts when I leave to even enter the Gaza Strip, which without all the extra steps in place would take within 5 hours. As it is, last entry that I came in on, over 13 hours because of all the bureaucracy and all of the steps that have to take place. So it starts there for me as a humanitarian. And then once we're here, and I'm trying to work with colleagues to make sure that we can get to the places to do our programming, that is further frustrated by all the different areas and the different names that the Israeli authorities have come up with for restricted areas that need close coordination. And when I say that, just to give a small example, in order to do coordination, there's, of course, this has to be submitted at least 24 hours in advance. And then step by step, you need to be in touch with the Israelis and their civil military liaison in order to even go down the road a few kilometers. And they can stop you whenever they want to stop you. They can deny your requests whenever they wanted to deny your requests. And another tool that they use is ambiguity and uncertainty. And they do this consistently. So even when very serious steps are taken by them, for example, to establish evacuation orders in various areas, they're not clear on exactly what that means, on what coordination that needs to happen, if humanitarian agencies are exempt or not. And they'll frequently flip back and forth. So this is all part and parcel of a very deliberate, a very thought out plan to confuse and frustrate access, again, in order to sideline humanitarian agencies. And that's fundamentally the problem right now.
Oxfam has called for international action. This is not the first time one hears the call for international action. What should world governments be doing right now? Because these sentiments have been echoed on and on and on since the beginning of this entire war.
Well, all governments should be taking a deep look internally and reaching down and holding Israel accountable, demanding a ceasefire, demanding that all access routes open up immediately in order to end the starvation, in order to end the famine-like conditions that exist in the Gaza Strip, and put an end to this. And additionally, start asking difficult questions of the state of Israel, like why all Gazans are held in contempt for the actions of a few. It's one thing to take on an enemy, it's another thing to take on a civilian population and to execute collective punishment. And that's what needs to happen. And these need to be political solutions, and countries need to cease and desist with the token gestures and the lack of substantive action. This is needed now in order to save lives, because literally lives are in the balance.
The humanitarian aid issue, they say it might be diverted to Hamas, and this is Israel. How do you respond to that particular statement, that humanitarian aid might be diverted to Hamas? Maybe that's why this blockade and the manner in which they're administering it.
Right. Yeah. I'm not in a position to say exactly how much goes into the hands of Hamas. Right now, Hamas is very fragmented. What I will say is that's not a good enough reason to cease all goods coming into the Gaza Strip for several months and then turn it back on at a trickle pace. Again, that's the difference between taking on your enemy and prosecuting them with military action and executing collective punishment against the entirety of a population. So I'm not going to say how much aid has gone into the hands of Hamas or not, but that's not the real point. The real point is that is not an excuse for an entire population, 2.5 million people, literally suffering, literally starving, because of the possibility of this aid falling into the wrong hands. We're well past the point where that should even be considered. This is a human manufactured disaster that's happening right now, the likes of which we have truly not seen. And I don't mean to use superlatives or become hyperbolic in the least. We have the evidence. The evidence is there that this is the reality. People are starving. People are malnourished. And that should not be happening anywhere.
Are there any groups there in Gaza that are completely cut off from assistance at this stage?
Completely cut off from what kind of assistance? Just for
from
clarity?
the humanitarian aid and, as well as ongoing protection, whom are just cut off completely.
Certainly there are. We reach as many people that we can with the limited programming that we can do. We'd like to do more programming. Were the blockade lifted? Were there a ceasefire? But not all the agencies that are on the ground right now can reach all the population. So certainly there are those most vulnerable, as I mentioned before, those who do need the aid the most. But the less that we're able to do our jobs, the less we're able to reach those people. So the situation is indeed dire. As I said, that the evidence is there. And why people, particularly Israeli officials, continue to waffle on this topic and act as though there isn't sufficient evidence for it, I don't understand. I'm on the ground and I can tell you it's happening. I'm seeing it with my own eyes. And furthermore, there's also this rhetoric going around that things are complicated. Again, it's not complicated. The only thing that needs to happen is for access of goods to come into Gaza using the existing roads, the existing gates, and a ceasefire, and put an end to this.
Let me finally take something out of you, and I hear you have pleaded with the world, but if you had the world's attention right now for 30 seconds, what else would you say?
That's a great question. We live in dark times right now. And I would say of all the conflicts going on right now, it's not appropriate to rank them, but Gaza would be certainly up there among the various conflicts, and certainly one of the darkest pieces of humanity right now. It is incumbent upon us as humanitarians, it is incumbent upon us as citizens of our countries and citizens of the world, to be beacons of light in order to shine on the darkness and expose evil for what it is. Now is the time. Now is the time to do that.
Chris, there aren't any better words to capture what you have just said. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
That was Chris McIntosh, Humanitarian Response Advisor with Oxfam in Gaza, speaking to us in the wake of the IPC's Famine Alert.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
In recent weeks, East Africa has seen a disturbing rise in human rights violations. In Kenya, digital activist Rose Njeri was arrested under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act after creating a tool for citizens to oppose the Finance Bill 2025. Meanwhile, in Tanzania, Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and Ugandan lawyer Agatha Atuhaire reported being detained, tortured, and sexually assaulted by security officers.
East Africa needs a reset. We need to get back East Africa to where the founding fathers are. You know, when President Nyerere and his colleagues Jomo Kenyatta and the Ugandan counterparts fought for independence, they fought for independence to get Africans out of poverty, to get Africans out of slavery. The leaders who took up power have since gotten into regression.
Neto Agostino, co-leader of the United Green Movement Party.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk. Channel Africa, the best nighttime radio.
Cattle rustling is no longer just a local crime, it's become a major driver of violence and instability in parts of West Africa. A new report by the Global Initiative Against the Transnational Organized Crime reveals how armed groups like Janim are using stolen livestock to fund operations across the Sahel, and how the trade is spilling over into neighboring countries like Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. The report also highlights the role of state-backed forces in this illegal economy. Joining us now to unpack these findings is Floor Berger, a senior analyst at the Global Initiative and the lead author of the report. Floor, just to start, what exactly is cattle rustling and why has it become such a serious issue in the Sahel?
Thanks for having me. So cattle rustling in the Sahel and in other parts of West Africa is pretty much now part of the conflict ecosystem, where we see all conflict parties looting animals from communities. So it will mostly take the form of, an armed group like Janim that you mentioned, attacking a community, and as part of this attack, they will loot the animals that these communities have. And on the other side, we have state-backed forces, as you mentioned, the VDP, who part of counterterrorism operations are also looting animals. The other main form of cattle rustling is when JNIM has a certain level of influence over a given community, they will then start to impose the zakat, which is sort of Islamic tax, building some kind of governance with these communities, but at the same time asking them to give or forcibly give some of the animals to them.
How are armed groups like JNIM now using the cattle rustling to finance their operations?
Yes, so basically once they have, JNIM and other groups have looted the animals, they don't steal these animals to, keep them. So very quickly they will be in touch with intermediaries, often local traders, that will be in charge of selling these animals for them. And in exchange, they will get money. And there are also cases where JNIM exchange cattle against other goods that they need, and that can be motorbikes or fuel, especially from Ghana. So it is a key financing and resourcing mechanism for them.
What makes the tri-border area between Burkina Faso and Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire so important in this trade?
So it is a key area, not only because there are JNIM is operating in this area and is looting animals, but mostly it's important. It's an important area because actually the conflict hotspots, so where JNIM is the most active and where the violence is the highest, is further north in Burkina and east, as well as Mali, and especially animals from central Mali, where the conflict is at its highest. We see animals looted there by JNIM being sold or transiting through the tri-border area and sold in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. So now we really see conflict ecosystem and this criminal, this illicit economy interlinking the Sahel and coastal countries like Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire.
From what you've just mentioned, I pick up that Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are being used to launder stolen cattle. How does that actually work in practice?
Exactly. So the main laundering hubs. So in Cote d'Ivoire, there are two big markets in the northeast, in Doropo and Bouna, where thousands of animals are being sold every month, and most of them come from Burkina. And so a lot of stolen animals are mixed basically with non-stolen animals and sold on these official markets. For Ghana, in the Upper West, there are no big cattle markets, so most of the time local intermediaries that work with JNIM will bring the animals on the other side of the border, on the Ghana side, load them in trucks and send them further south in Ghana to be then sold in consumption markets in Accra, for example.
State-backed groups like the VDP are reportedly involved too. How often does that affect community trust and the broader fight against extremism?
Yeah, so that's a key finding of the report, and it's extremely concerning because the VDPs were created by the Burkinabe government to defend the territory and to protect communities. But since 2024, herders have been, during our research, have been telling us that the VDP are the main threat. And so that creates a lot of mistrust between the VDP and more largely the authorities and the communities. And there's also a lot of intercommunal tensions created by cattle rustling. And so all of these are entry points for groups like JNIM who will exploit them to continue expanding their operation and their influence within these communities.
What role are local traders or middlemen playing? Are they knowingly involved or being exploited too?
Yeah, so they're key intermediaries. So we, in the report, we map all actors along the supply chain, from those local agents or local intermediaries that are in contact with JNIM and often will get their animals from forested areas or areas they control. But then there are also larger traders, and these are the most actually make the most profits. Those large traders that will buy a lot of animals from northern Cote d'Ivoire or northern Ghana, transport them to the south and sell them. But cattle traders are a key actor along the supply chain. So are transporters or truck drivers, but also butchers and to some extent local authorities that allow this trade or enable this trade to continue.
How's this and then in turn affecting herder communities on the ground, both economically in terms of safety?
Yeah, there are huge impacts. That's why we really wanted to focus on cattle rustling, because not only is it a key driver of conflict, as we already talked about, but it has huge implication for these communities, because economically, they rely exclusively on the animals, and so if they lose their entire herd overnight, that's all they have, and they've lost it. But also, as we already mentioned, it creates a lot of intercommunal tensions, a lot of mistrust between them and the authorities. They basically feel left alone, facing all these threats, threatened by the armed groups, threatened by the state-backed forces. And so all of that, again, creates entry point for JNM to expand.
And finally, Flo, what can governments or regional actors do right now to disrupt these networks and protect the beloved citizens, civilians rather?
Yeah, so there is a lot already happening, and in the report we try to focus a lot on, current initiatives, which ones are working, which ones can be enhanced, and, it's mostly along three key themes. The first one is the prevention of theft by, for example, building cattle parks where animals can be put safely. There are a lot of initiatives around tracking the animals once they have been stolen, for example, by the use of WhatsApp groups where herders can get in touch, also across borders. And there are also initiatives that focus on all these animals not being able to be sold on regional markets and being laundered in these official markets. So a lot of initiatives focus on that to get to understand where these animals are coming from, who is selling them, are they stolen, are they not, and avoid the laundering of these animals on the regional markets, among many others, but I'll stop there.
Thanks for your time this evening, Flo.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
That was Flo Berger, a senior analyst at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime and author of the latest report on cattle rustling and insecurity in the tri-border region of Burkina Faso, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. Now let's have a look at the money matters. Banks of Africa's latest data shows that South African salaries held steady in June following 3 months of moderation. The average nominal take-home, the pay, was 17,310 in June 2025, a marginal decline of just 0.1% from the 17,325 rand recovered in May. Despite this slight dip, salaries remain significantly higher than the previous year, when the average was 15,514 rand. However, independent economist Elisa Kruger cautions that while salary earners are in a somewhat better position, that broader economic outlook is concerning. Nothando Makutulela reports.
Take-home pay, tracked by Banks of Africa, found that external factors weighed on future earnings and unemployment levels. It says, while the first 6 months of the index data signal that the year 2025 will on average be a good salary year, the recent 3 months saw a dip in take-home pay. Real take-home pay, adjusted for inflation, moderated marginally by 0.2% month-on-month to 14,804 Rand in June compared to 14,827 Rand in May, but still notably up on levels a year ago. Independent economist Elise Kruger.
Banks of Africa's take-home pay index flattened in the month of June after having moderated for 3 consecutive months. While salary earners are in a somewhat better space in the first half of 2025, the economic environment has deteriorated in recent months, and especially the levels of uncertainty in the economy has resulted in lower confidence and also a pause on investment decisions. This will be negative for economic activity in the second half of the year, and there's really a concern that it could have a negative impact on both employment and on earnings potential in the second half of the year.
Kruger says in addition to supporting salary earners' consumption expenditure and softening the impact of global headwinds on the local economy, the favorable inflation environment has created ample scope for the South African Reserve Bank to cut interest rates further. Notando Makutulela in Johannesburg.
Thanks for tuning in. Channel Africa, Africa World Hour. My name is Thabiso Huku, and this is the end of the show for today. Up next, it's Hardliners.
Hotlines bring you fresh perspectives